I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending November the 16th, where despite pressure, we're still in the fall run, and there's a lot of pressure on the markets, and the fat cattle should be going up, and it's not, but the moods did improve this week, through the week. Couldn't have gotten much worse than they were early last week. We had just come off of a very, very disappointing fat cattle trade where the Packers strung it way until the weekend to get it done, and we had felt like we were going to gain some ground and ended up losing some ground. And then they come in with these penalties and discounts on these heavy carcasses, knowing that there was several feedlots, producers that had heavy cattle that they had been producing, trying to reach a profit by feeding their way into it, and understanding that there would not be a penalty on those cattle, and then wouldn't you know it, whenever they get them there, then they're going to start penalizing them, and it really pulled the rug out from under the market and everybody's moods especially, and everybody was pretty sour about things. And then the calf market was terrible starting the week out last week, but as we moved through the week, we ended up having a fat cattle market that was a lot better than what we feared, and it looked like that they were trying to set things up. I tell you what, these Packers are really playing hardball right now. They've got a taste of these monster profits that they've had every month, every quarter, every year here for the last 2 or 3 years, and they want to keep that up. And they tried to establish the market at $1.12 last week, and luckily the guys wouldn't take it. They wouldn't have that late in the week. Ended up having to give $1.14. But as things kind of started turning around a little bit, we started getting some footing in your calf market, albeit at lower levels, but we started seeing demand return in your calf markets, and the weather has turned consistently cold now. Your cattle like the cold weather as long as it's not cold and wet all the time or muddy, but just consistently cold weather is a lot easier to straighten calves up in. And we're kind of getting into just a little bit better place than what we were. Let's look at the board for last week. December live cattle futures. Monday was up 35 cents. Tuesday up 45. Wednesday down 77. Thursday up 55, and Friday up 20. With December live cattle contracts ending the week at 115.35, up 78 cents for the week. Your February ended at 119.72, up $1.92 for the week. So a little confidence there in the board too. November feeder cattle, Monday was down 62, but Tuesday come back strong with just 60 cents up on the spot November, but your out fronts were sharply higher on Tuesday, and that's when some of this confidence returned on some of your calves. And even though Monday and early Tuesday was really tough, but Wednesday your November feeder cattle run changed. Thursday was down 35 cents. Friday went off the board, had to go down another 79 cents to catch up with cash, and ended the week with November at 147.83. That was down $1.17 for the week. Your January was actually up 272. Remember, I told you the out fronts were sharply higher there middle of the week, but January ended at 146.52, and you look out at March, it's sitting just under 144. Your fat cattle trade, like I said, they tried to establish a market at $1.12. You actually had a pen in Kansas sell at $1.12 there earlier in the week, and a lot of times that trips the whole domino effect, and they fall right there. But through Thursday, they had only sold 13,800 head, just mostly all in the northern plains, and mostly lower, from 110 to 114, with a weighted average of around 111.05 on steers, although the heifer weighted average was almost $1.12 because they were discounting so many of those steers because of heavyweights. And but you look at your dressed market, 174 to 178, and the weighted average on your sales up through Thursday was 176 1/4. Then on Friday we have to wait till Friday at least, if not Friday night or Saturday, to sell cattle, because these packers are really buckling down on it. I mean, and they're shrewd, and they're better negotiators, and they're holding all the cards. And I tell you what, and you can't blame somebody for trying to buy things that they have to have as cheap as they can. You know, you and I do that every day whenever we look for fuel or whatever we're buying. But I tell you what, they've been hard to trade with. Friday finally got them up to $1.14. They thought they were going to get it down at $1.12. That didn't work. Then thought they were giving a gift at $1.13, and guys shook that off too. Mostly all $1.14, and that was mostly steady. If you remember, the previous week had just a little bit of $1.15, but then it started heading downhill fast, and most of the cattle actually sold at $1.14, and then the later sales that prior week were $1.13. But your dress trade on Friday finally broke loose at $1.78. Now that is a couple of bucks lower. If you remember, the previous week it was $1.80 with $1.78 on the heavies. This past Friday it was $1.78 with $1.77 on the heavies. But I did hear several people saying that in eastern Nebraska, packers were needing to buy some cattle in there, and that's where the bulk of our heavies cattle are. And maybe they weren't being quite so particular on the heavies there late in the week, as they started buying some cattle and getting some cattle that they knew some heavies were in, and all of a sudden it's not that big a deal. I tell you what, I'll take a big ribeye steak out of a heavy carcass any day, and you know, those cattle sure grade well, but it's just a reason that they can buy cattle cheaper. It's not that they're dragging the floor, you know, like we used to hear them talk about with all the big carcasses. You know, they've been killing big carcasses for years and years now. They know how to do it, and they just can. You know, why do they do something? Because they can. You heard the story about the dog, and that's why they're doing it. But box beef cutout values, the average trade for last week, choice cuts average trade $213.85. down $3.52, so we're seeing significant losses on our dressed beef market. Selects $198.34, down $298 from the previous week's weighted average on your trade. So, but I tell you what, there's not a lot of select product out there. You know, the lion's share of your cattle are grading choice anymore, and that a lot of that is because they're making them so much bigger. But choice select spread 15.51. and kind of a lighter movement of 580 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter had a big recovery because we started out the week with some breakdowns in the Southern Plains facilities. We were running behind all week, and then had a big Friday and actually recovered everything. 641,000 cattle slaughter for last week. 1,000 actually more than the previous week, and exactly the same as the same week a year ago. You look at your feeder cattle markets, your real-time index on Cattle Market Central ended the week at 144.51, down $4.54 compared to the end of the previous week. And if you looked in your feeder cattle auctions, you could sure see that. I tell you, it was really tough early in the week. Started to see a little bit of a turnaround on later in the week, and I think actually your early week high volume Monday sales should be a pinch higher, recovering some of those big losses, because we have found some more footing on this market at the lower levels. But $3 to $8 lower, mostly feeder calves. There's not a lot of yearlings out there anymore. We did see some of the lighter weight calves, especially the hard to find long time weaned ones that are ready to turn out on wheat, because it's time to turn cattle out on wheat. Everybody's turned cattle out on wheat. November the 15th you can turn out on leased wheat. So we started seeing some additional support in those long time weaned calves. And also in the southeast, your lightweight calves were actually higher for the week, steady to $3 higher. I guess those guys are going to try to straighten those cattle out on the wheat, and we're going to see how good of cowboys they are if that's what they're going to try to do, because that's tough way to serve the Lord is straightening shipped in calves out on the wheat. But we're starting to see some of your farmer feeders and farmer backgrounders get back into the market because they're wrapping up with their harvest. At the start of last week, your corn harvest was 84% done and beans was 88%. So not that they had a good week this past week because of some weather and moisture reasons, but we're just about to get that deal wrapped up, and we'll start seeing more farmers come into the market buying calves to background, and they'll continue to do that into the new year. But we also heard talk of some more additional support into your beef markets. Talk of Japan getting rid of some of those import restrictions that they've had ever since the mad cow deal in 2003. They started out wanting cattle younger than 20 months, and then now 30 months, which is, you know, almost all of the graded cattle that we have are younger than 30 months. But it will just lift some restrictions, make it a little bit easier. They won't, the plants won't have to keep the older carcasses as separate as much, and whenever they're talking about some cattle to go for export and things like that. So it's just a good thing, and I can kind of smell my old buddy Trump in that deal a little bit somewhere. But you look at some markets there late in the week. Fort Scott, Kansas, Saturday sale had a really good sale, just short of 2,500 head there at Fort Scott. Your market was mostly higher than the previous week, because you remember they were starting to get a lot of that pressure from all the sour market indicators that we had the previous week, and by the end of this past week, I tell you what, things had started turning around quite a bit, but mostly higher on your best represented weights, especially on heifers. But on steers, there were 406 head of 7-weight steer calves, and they'd mostly all be calves. Average 737 at 148.29 on the average. That was more than $7 higher than the weighted average the previous week, which they would have kind of had a stinker of a sale there, because I mean everything was against them. But included in that at Fort Scott, they had 77 head of steer calves there, weighed 738 and $158. And you talk about our calf markets, even up in the northern plains on those fancier calves, most of your 5-weight steer calves are in the 60s, the 160 somewhere, and maybe just either side. But that's kind of your market on those. But you look at St. Ange, South Dakota on Friday, 119 head of 474-pound steer calves bring 190.50, and that's a pretty good stroke there. But that's a look at your week's markets from a home DV auction office here in Canyon, Texas. We'll talk to you next week.